I am not a historian, but neither are you. So how about we, the people, learn this stuff together? US 101.
On May 29th, America celebrated Memorial Day. But May 29th also marked another milestone in American history that's especially important for people that get turned on by round numbers. May 29th marked the 100th birthday and one of the top 3 most handsome presidents of all time, John F. Kennedy. Now, unlike a lot of American presidents, Kennedy is very, very well known, especially for things like his inauguration address.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
He also pushed the United States to win the space race against Russia by having Americans be the first to land on the moon. There was the Cuban Missile Crisis. There was the Bay of Pigs. There was Marilyn Monroe singing happy birthday to him at Madison Square Garden. There was his insane New England accent, and ultimately his assassination in Dallas, Texas in November of 1963. In essence, it seems as if every single American knows the basic facts about John F. Kennedy. You don't have to study him, you don't have to be a scholar on JFK. It's basically stuff that we were all taught in school. But for today's episode, guys, I'm gonna help you start down the road of becoming a JFK scholar, okay? Because in honor of his 100th birthday, today's episode will present 10 fun and lesser known facts about JFK. And why don't we start with the fact that prior to his assassination, Kennedy nearly died 3 times before then. For those of you that don't know, JFK was a sick man. And no, I'm not talking about sick and the why the would you even think about that in that certain kind of way kind of sick. No, I'm talking about sick as in his health was not very good. His health was an issue throughout his life. In fact, in 1947, he was diagnosed with Addison's disease, which came to light after he became gravely ill on a trip to England. In fact, he was so sick when he went to England, on the ship back to America on the Queen Mary, a priest offered him last rites because they thought he was not going to make it back to the United States. The second time that last rites were offered to JFK was in 1951. When he suffered from a really high fever during a trip to Asia, and then they were offered to him again in 1954 after he slipped into a coma following surgery on his back. Another time that Kennedy could have died was during World War II, when his boat, the PT-109, was under attack by the Japanese. Now, this story about Kennedy and his boat, PT-109, is actually well documented in his book, Profiles in Courage. You guys have probably heard the story. The ship was under attack. All his men were drowning. And so what he did was he swam to shore, and he swam to shore with one of his buddies. His life jacket was in his teeth, and he was swimming while pulling his buddy with the strap in between his teeth. You probably heard the story before. Now, because of Kennedy's heroics during that battle and because he was injured in that battle, he received a Purple Heart, which is given to soldiers who are wounded or killed in battle, thus making JFK the only president America has ever had to have received a Purple Heart. Another fun fact about JFK, when he was president, he donated his entire presidential salary to charity. However, this wasn't because JFK wanted to be like a pious man and, give up all of his money to charity. It's because his family was quite rich. His father, Joe, had built up a massive family fortune for the Kennedys, so he had money to fall back on. So the presidential salary, he didn't really need it. He had his own money. JFK was a huge fan of James Bond. In fact, his favorite Bond adventure was the one called From Russia with Love. And because of his immense love of James Bond, maybe it's because they were 2 dashing good fellows, he tried writing his very own spy novel. And the story focused on a government coup d'etat that is masterminded by the Vice President, Lyndon B. Johnson. And speaking of Johnson, it's said that he and Kennedy did not really like each other. In fact, it said that the only reason that Johnson was even put on JFK's ticket as his VP was so that they could secure Texas in the election. And it also turns out that had Kennedy lived long enough to run for a second term, he might not have put Lyndon Johnson on the ticket with him the second time. In a memoir that was written in 1968 by Evelyn Lincoln, who was Kennedy's secretary, she says in the book that Kennedy was contemplating replacing Johnson when he ran for his second term. And speaking of Kennedy's second term, when he started thinking about his re-election, he was very confident that he would win in the 1964 election because he was confident that he would beat the GOP's candidate, which was Barry Goldwater. But apparently in 1963, he confided to a friend that he was really hoping that the Republicans didn't select this one Michigan governor to run for president on the GOP ticket, and that governor was George Romney, aka Mitt Romney's father. Apparently, Kennedy said of George Romney, quote, "The one fellow I don't want to run against is Romney." That guy could be tough. In 1962, Kennedy signed the Cuban trade embargo, which officially banned all Cuban products from coming into the United States. But just before he signed that embargo, this slick motherfucker right here, man, let me tell you what he did. He went ahead and had his press secretary, Pierre Salinger, go and get him 1,200 Cuban cigars before he banned them from coming into the country. The perks you get for being the president. JFK was also a movie producer. In a manner of speaking, I mean to say he had his hand in the making of two movies, PT 109 and 7 Days in May. For PT 109, Kennedy wanted the actor Cliff Robertson to play him in the movie, while Mrs. Kennedy wanted Warren Beatty to play JFK. But ultimately, Kennedy got his wish, Cliff Robertson got the role, and he also helped pick the director of the movie, Leslie Martinson. The other film, 7 Days in May, was based on a book of the same name that Kennedy was a big fan of. So when the movie needed to shoot scenes just outside of the White House, even though the Pentagon didn't really want this movie to be made, Kennedy went ahead and conveniently took his family to their resort in Hyannisport so that the movie could actually shoot at the White House without any sort of presidential or Secret Service disturbance. Here's another fun fact. Kennedy was so obsessed with his weight that whenever he traveled, he brought a bathroom scale with him, which I guess makes sense. I mean, I guess it's easier to bring a scale with you as opposed to telling your team to have a scale at the ready every time you go traveling somewhere. Johnson, go ahead and put the scale right down there. I feel a bit pudgy this morning. I shouldn't have eaten all those nachos. And the final fact for today's episode, guys, while we all know that Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, it turns out that prior to that assassination, there were multiple attempts on his life. One of those attempts involved a retired postal worker who I guess was very upset that Kennedy became president. So what he did is he loaded his car with dynamite and then followed the president, drove behind the president's caravan from Hyannisport to Georgetown to Palm Beach, Florida. And then in the weeks before he was killed, two more assassination attempts were uncovered, one in Tampa, Florida, and one in Chicago, Illinois. So there you go, guys. 10 facts about John F. Kennedy that you can now drop at any time you want on your plebe friends that just aren't in the know, while at the same time making yourself the talk of any social gathering that you may attend. One word of caution about these facts, though. When you do drop them on people, I do recommend that you not do it while trying to impersonate Kennedy's accent, because that will become annoying real quick, and I guarantee you'll probably get smacked in the face. Just from me to you. Don't say I didn't warn you. And that is it for this episode of US 101, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Really do appreciate it. And thank you to all of you that have subscribed to the channel, for liking the videos, for sharing them, for leaving comments on the videos. I really do appreciate it, man. You guys are my best friends. As always, you can follow US 101 on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. All the links down below in the description box. And guys, I got to make sure I give a special shout out to my boy Isaac for hooking us up with today's viewer intro. Isaac, thank you so much, sir. Job well done. And for those of you that want to submit your own viewer intro so that you can kick off future episodes of US 101, you can send your intros to ushistory1882@gmail.com. And on that note, guys, thank you again for watching. I am all done, and I will see you next Tuesday for another episode of US 101. And on that note, I will leave you with the fine words of JFK. The torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans. Are you annoyed by my accent yet? You should be. It's an annoying sound.